allow me to tell you about two different stories from two very different lives. One of a teacher, an educator, me, and one of war and fear and desperation of a little boy that I once knew. Allow me to tell you how those stories have overlapped and interweaved and became one. A story of stilettos and of mud, of explosions in refugee camps, and of strength in the face of adversity, of Dunkirk's spirit. Story one starts with a gobby girl from Watford who found herself teaching in an education system, a system increasingly in turmoil, hearing stories of lost hope, cultures of fear, diminishing faith. A system that causes 1 in 4 of our newly qualified teachers to leave the best job in the world in the first few years of their career, and 1 in 10 to flee our profession every year, increasingly many in search of a better work-life balance. Fleeing. Wars are not won by evacuation, but sometimes the urge to escape dominates. Whether it be a classroom or a war zone, there's always the quiet promise of a better life elsewhere, of hope, of sparkling efflorescent movie tomorrows, of just being somewhere else. I'm a teacher. It's been in my blood since I was a child, and yet after 16 years of inspiring young minds, or at least trying to, I found myself joining those statistics, disheartened by a system that increasingly trained dancers with set, regimented routines and steps, rather than building humans with the ability to freestyle or to dance like nobody's watching. And so I made the difficult decision to quit. Unable to align my values and ethos to the system that I found myself in, I walked away. I didn't walk away. I staggered, suffering from anxiety attacks, panic attacks, and utterly heartbroken. My whole identity was lost, because what is a Natalie who always wanted to teach but could no longer step inside a classroom? And running parallel, but in a totally different life, is story number 2. I call it a story. I've used a bit of creative license there because I don't actually know the beginning or the ending. The truth is, it's a series of snapshots, memories of one little boy's journey, a collection of photographs that now I hold close to me to stop me forgetting him completely. Story 2 is a story born of war, of the 65 million people who were forcibly displaced from their homes in 2015. One of 25 million refugees. Story 2 belongs to Spiderman, a 6-year-old from Kurdistan. A boy with no real beginning or ending, a timeless, transcendent boy. A boy who will forever be 6 years old, wearing that red and blue jacket and in that camp. He loved the colour yellow, and he loved dinosaurs. But more than anything, he loved helicopters. And we'd be sat there in our tent, and he'd hear them way before I would. And he'd jump up, and he'd be out, and our lesson would be destroyed with him beckoning and pointing up at Dunkirk skies that once were full of World War II fighter bombers and Spitfires, but now were home to his helicopters of hope. And I'd follow him, gazing up at infinite possibilities. And we'd twirl and we'd spin like rotor blades or propellers, gliding, dancing, laughing. All children deserve an education. It's a fundamental human right. And yet Spiderman had never been to school before I met him. In fact, only about 50% of forcibly displaced children of primary age are in full-time education. And these statistics get more alarming the older these children get. There's only a 25% chance that Spiderman will ever be in secondary education. And there's only a 1% chance that he'll ever get to higher education, to university. And some of these children found their way, or were carried, broken-limbed, clothed in desperation, to Western Europe, to the refugee camps of northern France. And this is where my story and my path crossed with his. Maybe there is another way, a way to fall back in love with teaching, and a way to provide an education for these children who are amongst the most vulnerable in our society. Another way, possibly, to look at the current retention and recruitment crisis in education. How about we shift the focus to a humanitarian crisis, an unprecedented human tragedy, an international disaster? And one day I'm sat there on my sofa and I receive a call. Natalie, we both know what you get like when you sulk, he said. You're one of the lucky ones, he said. Come and see for yourself, he said. And so I did. I traded my stilettos for my wellies, and off I went to the refugee camps of northern France. The camp that I met him in, that we met in, no longer exists, but its story remains. It's sadly duplicated across the whole of our continent. In France, Belgium, Greece, Macedonia, Turkey, little children are living in illegal squalor. The camps are unsanitary, uncivilized, and totally unsafe. The icy air stank of sewage, of human excrement, and you'd tread in it, slip in it. You'd get it on your clothes and on your hands. And there weren't showers and toilets. There was very little running water, to be truthful. I remember that camp in Dunkirk, a place historically synonymous with war. And now it was home to a new generation of people who were frantically battling and fighting for the hope of a better life. I remember shivering, my nose running, my lips painfully cracked. I remember teaching lessons whilst gunfire echoed in the distance, whilst the tents next to ours went up in flames, the air filling with a thick black smoke. I remember oil cans exploding around us. In Europe, not the Europe I grew up in, but Europe nonetheless, Europe today. And whilst my lucky students at home fail to see how privileged they are to study Shakespeare or Blake, Spiderman and his peers were desperate to learn way more than just the €10,000 price tag of being smuggled to our glittering shores. I saw illness, really poorly children. I admit I turned a blind eye at times. Sometimes they'd disappear, I don't know where, without warning, without trace. I stopped double-taking at the little ones who'd squat and poo outside our school tent, and at the well-meaning aid workers who'd try and train them, the children, to use those little plastic bags that we in civilized England reserve for our animals, dogs. And yet, the unwavering hope of humanity, the strength of childhood innocence, penetrated and sliced through the bitter reality of that camp. In Dunkirk, I met some of the most beautiful, brave, and resilient children who I have ever been blessed to teach. Little superheroes. And while our media incites racial distrust and hatred, telling me that he is just one of a swarm, a sponger, a violent migrant who needs restraining with angry barbed wire fences, a little boy who without doubt will grow up to be a terrorist. I just remember his smile and his tinkling laugh, his sprinkling of mischief. I remember a precious little boy who's seen things that I hope I never will. A boy who might have made a helicopter engineer or pilot in another country, another world, another life, another time. He loved those magical flying machines, but passion and fascination with education will never be enough to change his life. He taught a cynical ex-teacher, a broken and battered communicator, me, the true power of education. He reminded me of what had led me into the profession in the first place. When I was teaching him inspections and marking policies and data analysis and performance management all paled into utter insignificance. I taught him because I wanted to, and he learned, and I loved my job again. And then one day he vanished, and I never saw him again. And I wish that I could hold his little broken fingers in my hand once more, to watch him quietly tracing the alphabet and numbers onto his muddy page. I wish I could tell him that he changed the course of my life, that he was the reason that I then eventually came back into education. That's the change in him from a silent and scared little boy to a boy who literally wouldn't shut up, who loved learning, inspired me and reminded me why I teach. I'd like to tell him that he featured in my blog, a blog that then won an award. Truth be told, I think because of him, because people who read it all fell just desperately in love with his story. He's counting to 2. He taught me that behind every headline and statistic is a person, a child, a student, a teacher with a story. That a relationship, the gentle touch, a kind word of reassurance is far more powerful a weapon than fear or control. So in these times of turmoil, in these shifting sands of political and educational change, we must remember that education is the key to a better life for us all. We measure teachers on how well they choreograph these routines of knowledge and recall and knowledge and recall, knowledge and recall. And we judge our students on very little else other than their exam results. But what if, instead, we taught them to measure by the deeds that they do, that true value lies in how you treat your fellow man? What if we could teach our children in the UK and Europe and maybe even beyond that showing kindness in the face of intolerance or ignorance is the way to a better world? What if, on one thin ice, progressive and traditionalist teachers could for once stand united with a collective voice against the frightening xenophobic winds of our time? What if? I don't know. But what I do know is that sometimes life doesn't take us where we thought it would. That sometimes we walk that path in a pair of fantastic heels. And other times we trample through shit in our wellies. But so long as we keep going, I figure that's fine. Because without darkness, we never appreciate the sun. And there's very little that helps us to value our own lot more than seeing humanity at its most desperate. I didn't end up where I thought I'd be. Never in a million years did I think that I'd tread in the mud of a camp, or back into a classroom, or here onto this stage with you. But each of us has just one thread of a life, and it's a thread that we sew, or if we sew into a tapestry with others, becomes so much stronger. I've sewn my story to Spiderman's, and if our journey can help to rebuild faith in disillusioned teachers, or to build a brighter future for some of those children, that lost generation of children so desperately in need of education, or even do that just for one, then I reckon I'd be content with that. So remember, please, that out of the mud, a lotus of hope can grow. And out of the flames of exploding gas cans, a phoenix of a teacher can rise and be reborn. Education is little more than inspiring young children. So if you are a teacher who is feeling like the battle has nearly been lost, then please spend your last bit of energy looking for your Spiderman. And if on your travels you happen to see mine, please tell him I'm still searching for him, that I want to twirl and spin with him once more, to watch him learn and to teach him. And I want to thank him because I owe him my career. Thank you.